my name is Erin McNeil, and today I'll be speaking about whaling and canoes of the Makah and New Chalmouth tradition. So here's a map of the traditional territory, and it's just to show you where the Makah are located on the northern tip of Washington on Cape Flattery, and how New Chalmouth. So then the New Chalmouth are located right here on the west coast of Vancouver Island on British Columbia. And then just to explain why they focus on whaling and to the use of canoes is because of the rocky terrain and the mountain ranges that basically divide them from being able to gather and hunt like other tribes. So this focuses them to live a more coastal lifestyle. Here's a few notes on the history of whaling. So from archaeological sites, it just kind of notes that they've been doing this probably it's been since 4,000 years ago. And historically, they did it for subsistence. Instead of today, would be to honor tradition. And then historically, they did whaling around spring, summer, and early fall. And then what's interesting is how we would divide land. They divided their sea by say if someone was on a canoe, they could divide the sea out by the coastline or something. That's how they divide it with the families and the other tribes. And then just a timeline on a few points that would affect whaling. And this is mostly focused on the Makah. So we have our European contact in 1778 with Captain Cook. And then also after that, commercial fishing and whaling sped up. And then by the 1840s, American whalers would go to New Bay to receive whale oil from Makah. And then you had your outbreak in 1852 of smallpox. And then by 1853, more focusing again on the Makah, the Washington became a U.S. territory, thus invading the Makah and their whaling traditions and other things. And then by 1855, Governor Stevens created whaling rights and land ownership. So he focused more on the land and giving them acres of land, but really their true economic value was in the sea. And so just to make a note on that and have the misunderstanding of each other. And in 1913, the gray whales were near extinction, and the gray whales were near extinction, and Makah hold last traditional whale hunt. Then around the 90s is when the population of the gray whales came back, and they were able to do the 1999 when they went out in Makah and did the whale hunt, which was very controversial. You had your activists who didn't agree, but then also it's a tradition they were just trying to practice. And so this is something I learned from Joe about how they started at a young age, whether it would be canoes or whaling. But this is more focused with the whaling, is to learn how to be a strong swimmer, be able to dive. And also something he talked about was how to practice breathing and taking that fern and walking out to the forest and pulling a leaf off one at a time and just actually holding your breath while you're doing that. And that was a way to strengthen your focus while you're trying to capture that whale, and also to prevent panicking, say you're underwater. So preparation for a whale hunt, rituals and ceremonies. So I think it was before going out was more on the individual basis. You would go to the mountains and be on your own. It said they would call upon the chiefs. They had 4 different chiefs. 2 of them I can remember are the sky and the horizon. And they would also fast certain foods and abstain from sex. So they had to be on their own in the woods and just get by themselves and get focused in order to contact the chiefs and get guidance on to have a successful whaling voyage. They also would try and find a good luck charm. They had spoke about a blackbird and finding that, and then having that to allow for good fortune. Whaling shrine for purification. Now this was more focused, I think, for the chief as well. So the chief, it was his responsibility to see that a whale was brought back, and so they would create a whaling shrine for purification, and this would also to entice dead whales to come ashore, and for ancestry and ancestors to beckon and alike honor this, they would use the corpses of previous tribe members as for their sacred ceremonies, and so they would be a part of the shrine. Tools and supplies. So of course you had your harpoon, which was a shell blade, usually a mussel, antler or bone barb, and wood shaft held together with spruce gum. And that would also be tied with whale sinew. And then there was the line, which was made from either cedar or whale sinew. And then the floats were made from a seal bladder. And then, of course, your canoes. And the purpose of canoes, because of where they are living and everything, is they're the main mode of transportation for transporting goods, warfare, hunting, and travel. Your warfare canoes were your biggest, and your second would be your hunting, so for whaling. And then whaling canoes were usually 28 feet to 38 feet in length. And this can be pretty lengthy, but of course, like with everything, just like the whaling, you had to be spiritually prepared when you were going out. And they would do that just before making a canoe. And with finding the perfect tree, I couldn't pick a tree that was near eagle's nest, bear den, or wolf den, and also to check it for rot with a chisel. Then from there, it would be into getting it down and removing bark and wood between stern and bow. And then they would season it for a winter, and then beach it. And from there, the person making the canoe would use the incisor teeth from beavers and carve it out. They would start on the exterior lines on the outside, hollow it out with a wedge, and then fill it with water. And to make it hot water to steam it, they would put hot rocks in there. And then to flare out, that would allow them to flare out the sides. And then prow and stern pieces and seats are then added. And then they charred the surface with fire to act as a protectant. So here's the images from where we had visited. And this is actually, a good example of technique. I'd say it's about the beginning of, say, their whale voyage. So there's the chief harpooner, who is the first to make the first hit. And from there, then he makes the signal to the rest of the guys. So this is about the beginning. And they always come in from the left. And as it's oriented, it's from the left. And they do the dorsal fin from behind. Not the dorsal fin, but the front fin from behind. And just some interesting facts is the gray whales and humpbacks were the most sought after. And ritual and prayer was also conducted while they were on the hunt. So prior and during, and as Jessica had noted in her slides, is that the wife had to stay home and stay inside. She could not move. She needed to stay in the dark and stay still. If she moved, because of how connected they were with the spirits, her movement, anything could affect the whale. So in a way, they were one. And a whale is not caught, but it gives itself up. So when they would go out, this is another image that would explain more in the middle of the whale hunt. They would go out with one large canoe and maybe multiple smaller or other ones that would be full of other people that would be ready to attack as well once the chief made the first hit. So I'm going to explain for this image because the next slide explains what's going on in this image. So once the chief gave that signal, they would throw in their harpoons too. And then once it started to get tired and roll around, initially though, when you hit the whale, it would go out. It would want to go down and go out to sea. But if they had done their spiritual ceremonies correctly and were connected and everything was fine, it would actually take them to the shore, basically agreeing that they had done everything well. And then once it's tired and everything's fine, a diver will jump in and tie the mouth shut, so when they're pulling it in, that water doesn't go in and cause it to sink, but keeps gases inside to keep it buoyant. And then, like I explained before, the seal skin floats would allow them to pull it in and keep it afloat. And then they would, as they're bringing it ashore, there would be praise and songs. The first to actually touch the whale, once it's brought ashore, is the whaler's wife, where she would sprinkle it with eagle down, and then the dorsal fin was the first to be removed. The chief kept the saddle of skin and blubber from this area. The saddle of skin is midway between your dorsal and your tail. And inside there is where they thought the spirit would reside. So once that was removed, it was actually kept out on display for 4 days. And from there, their point of that was to allow the spirit to relax and be released. And actually, it may enter another whale. And then from there was ritual prayers during this time. And the whale was then divided, maybe at the potlatch. And how it was divided, it was first your chief, then the crew who was on the hunt, the villagers who helped with the catch, and then from there it went by inheritance. And then if there was any like leftover bones that they did not use, they were placed outside the chief's house as a testament to him doing his job and providing for his tribe. And then for celebration, we have our potlatch, which is one of the most important potlatches was the whale oil potlatch. It shows wealth, and there they would act out whale hunts. And near the end, a canoe would be brought in and filled with whale oil. And then to show their wealth also, they would pour a little in the fire to say, we have enough that we can even waste a little into the fire. And then chiefs from other tribes would take some oil home. So uses for the whale carcass. Whale bones, they were used for rattles, for like ceremonies, tools, clubs, and then they were even used for their water systems, the versions that we have spoken about for their longhouses on the beach. Whale sinew was for ropes and cords, and the stomach and intestines would be used as containers to hold the oil. And then also the meat and blubber had nutritional value. Modern day significance of whaling. So as I explained before, historically they needed it for subsistence. They needed it to survive. They lived off the land. Now it would be just to honor our whaling ancestors, to continue that tradition, to reinforce the oral tradition. And they say like we're in a better time of it now, that we're actually the history of it, the tradition of it is going to be held better now for their children, because you guys, as we can see, from 1913 until 99, they were not able to practice. They did not have the means to practice it. And so now they're coming into a new generation where maybe it can be more awakened. And then just from stories that we have explained on oral tradition, this was the main one that stuck out to me. And it was the great thunderbird, the whale, and lightning serpent. And this explained how there was a starving community, and the great thunderbird saw that and went out and caught a whale which would stun the whale with the lightning serpent, and then it brought it back up with its talons and fed the community. And that is all.